Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld with Lisa Booth, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and at thimble is her ice bucket, Dana Perino, the 5. This is video of George Herbert Walker Bush when he crashed into the sea as a young pilot. It's what we call a hero. If you're young, playing video games, shopping online, or fulminating on Facebook, it's because of something called Leisure Time. And Leisure Time was brought to you by millions of men and women whose bravery in times of war made our idle activity possible. I wonder, would we even be here if it weren't for men like him? The passing of George Herbert Walker Bush reminds me of the recent passing of John McCain. It also reminds me that only losing great men and women unifies people. We try to forget all about the other crap. In fact, we realize much of that crap is pointless. People come and go on our planet and in our lives, and it helps to remember that all of us have something in common with the great ones. With the exception of a few chuckle buckets who use such events to score political points, it's actually a shared loss that reveals how we really are. None of us tweet in the face of death. Kindler and gentler. Remember those words? It's a return to the baseline of human goodness. A great person dies and we can observe the rituals with reverence and respect as though it's second nature. God help those who can't. It's probably best to ignore them. So for this week, it's not a bad thing to use this passing of a great man as an excuse to make life better. Less finger pointing, more handshakes. I'm sure in time we'll get back to our tribes, but for now, let's do the guy a favor. Be kind and gentle in case he's watching. So, Dana, I'm sitting actually in your chair, which I feel quite strange.
So do I.
Yes. I don't like being this close to Jesse.
Yep. Stop touching me under the table.
So, Dana, the reverence lasted 10 seconds.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You started it.
Yes. Dana, you're in D.C. The state funeral's tomorrow. What are your thoughts? Anything that moved you particularly today?
Yes. Well, it's obviously an honor to be here and to be able to have known them and to talk about them. I thought your monologue was spot on, Greg.
Thank you.
Bloody on. Very good. A couple of things that touched me today. I got a chance to interview Vice President Dan Quayle.
Yes.
And to look back at 1988 when he gave the convention speech then. And, of course, you know, I remember that time. I'm sure you guys do, too. Maybe Jesse doesn't. Might be too young. Maybe Lisa Booth wasn't paying attention then because she's so young as well. But it does just, you realize that things change. Parties evolve. People have a way of sort of forgetting what things were like back then. And so moments like this allow you a chance to pause. The moment that really touched me today, though, was when Senator Bob Dole went to the Capitol. He's 95 years old, and as you see there, he is helped by an assistant to stand so that he could properly and in his way pay his respects to George H.W. Bush, who was a very good friend of his. Of course, they were competitors, but friendly competitors. But, Greg, I think it was last week we were talking about the greatest generation. I'm sorry, actually, it was Andy Ferguson's piece.
Right.
He was a friend of yours and a speechwriter for George H.W. Bush, and he wrote about a speech he had to give in which in 1992, and during his re-election, the political consultants said, don't talk about his war service. Don't let him talk about his war service because it will make him look too old in comparison to Bill Clinton. Then, 4 weeks before the election, the political consultants changed their minds and think, oh, wait, maybe we should highlight his war service. And he writes this speech, and at the end of it, he says, in the article he wrote, Ferguson says, nearly all of them are gone now. And I think maybe that's why it feels very poignant that this greatest generation, we're having to say goodbye to them.
It's true. It's not just Mr. Bush. It's who he symbolizes, an entire, millions of men that are no longer here. Juan, you worked for, were you at the Post in the 88? You probably ran into President Bush when he wasn't president or vice president.
He was vice president. That's when I spent most of the time with him, was flying around the country, going to Republican events to try to help get Ronald Reagan reelected, Greg. And so I had a wonderful time. It was kind of like, being at the feet of the master, because you talk about a political, he had been head of the Republican National Committee, in addition to running twice for Senate unsuccessfully, but then holding a House seat twice from Houston. So he had been through a lot politically, knew all the political leadership going back to the Goldwater days of '64. And you talk about a Republican Party expert. I mean, in terms of, I was just saying, you know, he's famous for writing notes to people, and I'm sure Dana has a ton. I have some, but he would write notes to all these party leaders so that they felt that they had a personal relationship with him. And the axiom here was, don't call somebody up to ask a favor, a political favor, a personal favor, right out the box without saying, how you doing? Yeah. Who are you? How are the kids? And that's the relationship he had, so that even people who disagreed with him, specifically, I would guess, in this day of tribes, as you say, Greg, the Democrats, oh my gosh, Democrats had a pretty good relationship. I mean, didn't always come to good political ends, because remember, in terms of the budget deal where he allowed taxes to be raised in order to lower the deficit, it was then held against him by some in the party, especially the far right, the Newt Gingrich types, who said, oh, you know, you're breaking your pledge not to raise taxes. Read my lips, no new taxes. But this is an example I keep saying that I would hold up to my children as the kind of person that you want to be. Someone who is about public service, love of country, love of family, and treated people as individuals, not as, gee, I'm George H.W. Bush, and who are you? No, it was like, tell me about you.
Mm-hmm. Jesse, thoughts?
Just some personal reflections, because I kind of came up under the age of Bush. You know, he was the vice presidency when I was young, and then his presidency, and then his son's presidency kind of formed who I thought a great statesman in America would be. Just a few things come to mind: humility, dignity, class, and love. You think about, he oversaw America winning the Cold War. That was a time where he could have said Americans should just beat our chests and gloat and spike the football. Instead, he didn't. And he said absolutely nothing. And that silence was very important at that time, and that was a very powerful moment. I think he was, raised in the prep school, boarding school era where, good sportsmanship is drilled into you, and he always won with class and dignity. Also, when he kicked Saddam out of Kuwait, he had an opportunity to rush to Baghdad and overthrow the entire government, and he was humble enough to know the limitations of American military power. And I think everyone, Republicans and Democrats, look back at that and say that was a very wise and humble and noble decision. Juan picked up on a few things. The personal relationships he had with people, professional relationships, friendships, he really conducted it in a classy way. He communicated on stationery or picking up the phone, and he did that for so many decades that he generated so much goodwill. And towards the end, the Republican Party was the party of Bush. The Rolodex, all of the people that he knew, the networks across the entire country, just had so much honor and reverence for him and his family that when he called and asked for something, it was sure. It wasn't a political favor. It was you were doing something for a friend. And then lastly, love. In terms of his relationship with Barbara and his sons, publicly at least, you'd think a man of his generation wouldn't be conditioned to show that kind of affection towards other people, especially his family, in public. But his love and affection, the way he displayed it, was very modern. He wasn't afraid of embracing people and crying and articulating that love. And I think every father and every son in this country should look at the relationship that he had with his sons and say that is how a true father-son relationship should be.
Well, and I was going to say, I found myself this week reading his letters. And I think there's been so much talk about his integrity, kindness, the kind of man he was. And if you read his letters, you can see it. And, the written word always lasts so much longer than, what you say on TV or what you say during a debate or what have you. And that's a beautiful thing for him, because what a great legacy to leave behind. And, Vice President Mike Pence talked about this yesterday when the former president, when he wrote a letter to his son, when he landed his first tailhook landing as a Marine aviator, and saying that he shares the pride that Mike Pence has in his son. You look at the letter he left Bill Clinton saying that you are our president, I am rooting for you, even though he defeated him and he was a one-term president. What a beautiful thing to have that sort of character, to leave that message for Bill Clinton. You look at the love letters to Barbara and what a beautiful, loving relationship that they had as a couple. The letter that he wrote about his daughter Robin, who they lost, and talking about the fact that she's always going to remain with them. So just all these letters, what a beautiful legacy for him to leave behind for future Americans to see the kind of integrity that the man had.
So, Dana, what's going to happen tomorrow at the funeral?
Well, you'll have eulogies from George W. Bush. I think that one will be hard for me to get through because I'm quite close to him. And as Christopher Buckley, another speechwriter, wrote, that they might have been New England roots, but they had the tear ducts of a Sicilian grandmother. Then you have Brian Mulroney, who is a Prime Minister of Canada, one of 41's best friends on the world stage. Former Senator Alan Simpson from the great state of Wyoming will also eulogize him, and then it'll be finalized with John Meacham, of the the historian who wrote so much about him. The last thing I would say is something that Greg, I think you and I have said this several times. 41 really embodied this, and we should all keep this in mind. Politics might be what we do, but it is not who we are.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Dana. Is Mueller finally ready to wrap up his investigation? The latest developments in the Russia probe. That's next.
New signs that Robert Mueller's so-called witch hunt is reportedly close to wrapping up. Yahoo News says the special counsel's legal team told President Trump's attorneys that they are, quote, tying up loose ends in the Russia investigation. This comes as new court filings due today on former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn could offer a roadmap to the Mueller findings. All right, so we're waiting this sentencing memo, Lisa. We have no idea what's going to be in it, but there's a lot of speculation. One of the things we do know is that James Comey did tell congressional investigators that he didn't think Flynn intentionally lied when the feds questioned him.
And that's been something that's been the back of my mind this entire time regarding Flynn, because you're right. Chairman Chuck Grassley of the Judiciary Committee has said that when Comey met with congressional investigators, the FBI investigators led them to believe that they didn't think that Flynn had lied. And then Mueller takes over the special counsel investigation, and then Flynn pleads to lying. And pleads guilty to lying. So, and then also Chairman Grassley has been on DOJ and the FBI to, one, give them the 302s with the interview that they conducted with Flynn so they can see what kind of questions were asked, what Flynn said. And they've also asked for the transcript of Flynn's conversation with the former ambassador Kislyak as well. None of those things have been provided to the chairman yet. So I have a big question about that. Did Flynn actually lie? And the tactics, I think it also speaks to sort of the tactics of Mueller as well, those hard-nosed tactics.
Right. And speaking of hard-nosed tactics, Cohen, the former attorney for President Trump, is due to be sentenced next week. And Juan, it looks like he's caught up in some Trump tower that doesn't even exist in Moscow. Somehow there's a scandal there, but he's facing a hard time as well.
How's that whistling past the graveyard going for you, Jesse?
I mean, you're a great whistler.
He's great. He's great. I tell you, he does it every day, Lisa. Whistling past what is obvious. By the way, before we get going, can I ask Greg a question?
Sure.
Who is scot-free? Because I see that President Trump is tweeting that Cohen should get maximum sentence and not get away, and then he puts in uppercase S and Scott.
I think that's Tariff Man's cousin.
Yeah, exactly. all I know is it's always great to see liberals criticize people over misspelling words.
It wasn't misspelling.
I think there's enough to go around.
But then he had this Twitter fury this morning.
Yes.
He went after not only Cohen, but then he said that Manafort, was it Manafort or Roger Stone, had guts.
Stone has guts.
Stone has guts because he won't testify.
Probably.
He won't turn on him. I mean, what is that obstruction of justice or what?
No, I don't think it is.
You know what's interesting? Listening to Juan and listening to other networks, it's like watching someone describe a drug trip that you're not on. They're just seeing things. It's hallucinations, impeachment, resignation, jail time. It's been a 2-year-long acid trip, and it's not the good acid. And then the media, to them, to the media, it's almost like Christmas. It's Christmas. This is their Christmas because, they don't really believe in this stuff anyway. So, but they're at the stage now where they're hanging the stockings and they're looking under the beds and the closets for all the presents. But the bottom line, they're never going to be happy unless they get this guy out because they're still suffering from being beaten and humiliated 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, they could get coal in their stockings. You don't know what Mueller's going to say.
Yeah,
clean coal.
Clean coal.
But we don't know what he's going to say, so I'm not leaping to any conclusions here.
Oh, you would never do that, Mr.
No, but I will say, boy, when you see the kind of fury in his tweetings this morning.
But this is old news.
It's like, wow, something's happening.
This is old news. Every day you're surprised by his tweets. To me, it's just like checking the weather. It's like, it's 49 degrees and there's a tweet.
Also, didn't Juan just leap to a conclusion?
What's
you
the
just told
conclusion?
you say we shouldn't leap to conclusions, but then you're reading his tweets and concluding something.
Come on.
Can we go act like that without a reason, Lisa?
Let's go to someone who's never been on an acid trip. Dana Perino in Washington, D.C. Dana, close it out for us. The Mueller investigation, hopefully, winding down.
So the Yahoo reporter that did that piece saying that it was about to wrap up is Michael Isikoff. Way back when I worked at the Justice Department, he was with, I think it was either Newsweek or Time magazine. And when we were spokespeople for the Justice Department, you could almost count every Friday night at 5 o'clock, Michael Isikoff would call and say, yeah, I'm about to drop a big story on you guys on Sunday. So he's got very good sources, follow him, pay attention to it. And the other thing I would say is if they are trying to wrap it up, everyone just put on your seatbelt. There's going to be some turbulence before this thing is landed, but the plane will safely land and everyone will be able to move on.
They'll never move on, Dana. They're never going to move on.
Well, then they can sit behind on the tarmac.
There you go.
Oh.
They can take the bus.
That tarmac. Maybe Bill will be there with Loretta. All right, President Trump ripping Democrats after caravan migrants breach the border. Hear what he's saying up next.
The crisis at the border apparently getting worse. Dozens of migrants in Tijuana scaling a 10-foot fence after reportedly becoming frustrated with the slow asylum process, while claiming illegal immigration costs the country $250 billion a year. Now, everybody's saying that's not true about the $250 billion, but let's leave it alone. What do you make, Lisa, of the idea that we could, in fact, have some kind of delay funding bill so it would delay the potential for closing down the government right now?
Well, if you're President Trump, now's the time to try to push for border funding or sort of some changes to our immigration laws. He's certainly not going to get it next Congress when Democrats take over. So I think he's sort of leveraging the opportunity now. I don't know if he's going to get it or not, but I sure think when you're seeing people break the law and illegally entering the United States like we're seeing now, and also what we saw most recently with almost 1,000 people trying to rush the southern border, it sure makes President Trump's point for needing a boosting over border security along the southern border. We also have that Yale study most recently saying that the number is probably closer to 22 million illegal immigrants living in the United States. So if we already can't solve the problem of all these people.
Money last year, and this, I think Anita Lowy from New York said this is the wasteful wall. What do you make of this?
I just think the funding discussion is, well, as you described it earlier, whistling past the graveyard. I mean, look at these images. You look at what's happening in Tijuana. Look at the elected officials there saying, we're going to need some help here, folks. This is a bigger story than just like the wall funding. I don't think the government will shut down. And besides, the Republican Congress working with the White House was able to get so much done on the spending front up to now. So a lot of those spending bills are already done. It'll only affect about 25% of the government if it does happen. I don't think it will come to that. I think the president will end up having a compromise. But talk about whistling past the graveyard. If the Democrats don't realize, images like this sear into the minds of people. You see children being dropped that far, and it's not ending well for the caravan participants, or the, I don't know what we want to call them, but the caravaners. They are putting children's lives in danger. I understand that they care about their kids, that they want to get something done. But the American people are not going to stand for this, and Democrats have better figure this out, figure out a way to get past their far left and come to the table with President Trump on it, or else they're going to find more losses in 2020.
And Jesse, the president, in fact, said this issue is a total political winner, and he's willing to stand against the Democrats, even in the face of, all the controversy about separating children from parents, tear gassing children and adults and their parents. What do you make? Do you think it's a political winner for Republicans?
Yeah, yes, I do. It does have a risk of becoming like his Gitmo. Remember when Obama for 8 years says, I'm going to close Gitmo. He ran on closing Gitmo, and 8 years later, he never closed it. You get to a certain point where you have to see visually a wall being constructed, or else you realize this thing is not happening. I want to do something with you, Juan.
Oh, my God, no.
Hey, wait a second. Is this like when you were touching Greta?
live television, Jesse.
There's going to be no touching. No touching.
Good.
I have 3 questions for you.
All right,
Okay.
go ahead.
Just follow along logically.
I'll play
and
with
I
you.
believe at the end of these questions, you will want a wall.
Okay.
Okay. Ready?
All right.
Do you believe in borders?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Do you believe currently the border is secure?
Yes.
No. Wrong. Okay. Because you just showed visuals of people dropping babies over the wall,
Yeah.
of people shimmying through the holes in the wall, and if you have a half
Wait a
a million
second.
people
I thought-
coming through every year,
wait a second.
that means the border is not secure.
Well, first of all, the number of people coming across the border is way down, even despite that. But secondly,
let's
if
stay
you
on
see
point.
people, but if you see people jumping
Let's stay
and
on point.
tunneling, does that mean that we need a wall?
If someone's tunneling under your house, do you
That's
think your
not-
house is secure?
No, that's what I'm
If
saying. A
someone's
wall's
jumping
not going
over
to do
your
the
wall in your house. Is
A
it
wall's
secure?
not
No.
going to do the job.
Okay, Juan,
yeah.
you're failing the basic logic test. Okay,
no.
the
I wanna
answer
go
to
to
the question, the answer to the question is the border secure. As
Okay.
everybody sees on the screen of the people dropping kids, is
That's Dana.
no.
That's not a wall.
The answer is no. Third question,
Yeah.
final question.
All right.
Do you believe walls enhance security?
No.
One, you have to use logic here.
Okay.
Let me give you an example of why you're wrong.
Okay.
Just
Yeah,
one.
sure.
All
Go
right.
right ahead.
A lot of the illegal immigration was coming through for many, many years in the Tucson sector. Okay.
Yeah.
And what did they do in Tucson? They built up all the fence.
Yeah.
And now it's funneled all the illegal immigration crossings to the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So can't you build a border wall there and then funnel the crossings to a place where the Border Patrol can safely
Wouldn't you
apprehend
think
them?
that they'll just like they move from one spot, they'll move to another spot? And
eventually
keep in mind,
you squeeze them.
And keep in mind, that's not the source of most illegal immigration in the country.
Okay.
Most of it is people overstaying visas who
Answer,
fly in
Juan
on
wants a
airplanes.
wall.
Oh yeah. Well, I agree with you, Jesse.
Thank you.
We
That's
gotta
all I wanted to hear.
I agree that this is a crazy conversation in America.
I don't know anyone.
Well, it is, because we were talking in the B block how the media was suffering from a collective drug trip in which they were seeing and hallucinating things. This is actually the opposite. When you actually see things happening and they're denying it. They're denying what their eyes see. Mm-hmm. Remember when Joe Scarborough, a.k.a. Mr. Bozo Face, said that he was comparing the caravan, the migrants coming, to Martians in his backyard. So apparently he has Martians. The Martians have landed. And then you have this other weird part where the media is blaming Donald Trump for the caravan, thousands of people coming. Only the left could hear Trump say, "You better not come," and hear, "He's telling him to come." No, he was telling him, "Don't come. It's not going to end well." To quote Dana, it's not going to end well. And the left go, "Oh, it's obviously his fault. He's encouraging them to come." No, it was manufactured. It was a manufactured march created by activist groups and the media. And now we're seeing it.
I think there were people in desperate straits down in Central America.
A lot. There's desperate straits
Juan,
everywhere.
you never let anyone have the last word.
Oh, I was going to let you have it. If you wanted last, go right.
I don't want the last word. I want you to tease so I can do my segment.
Oh, so there, you see that, Jesse? The wall's talking back to us.
She's the wall.
Up next.
A man who will be the next president of the United States, Barack America.
More moments like these stop Joe
never saw
Biden
that.
from running for president. That plus Michael Avenatti's big announcement about 2020 right here on The Five.
You just keep
Saying he's, quote, the most qualified person in the country to be president. The former VP also admitting that he's a, quote, gaffe machine for memorable moments like these.
My mother believed and my father believed that if I wanted to be president of the United States, I could be vice president. His mom lived in Long Island for 10 years or so. God rest her soul. And although your mom's still alive as your dad passed. God bless her soul. Chuck Graham, state senator's here. Chuck, stand up. Chuck, let him see you. Oh, God love you. What am I talking about? A man who will be the next president of the United States, Barack America. They're going to put you all back in chains.
I have a feeling we might be seeing that montage a while. Some of those gaffes are certainly endearing. Greg, let me ask you this. Is the Democratic Party looking for the most qualified?
No, not at all. He might be the most qualified, but he's an old white male, and that is the Ford Pinto of candidates in 2018. The preferred model is going to be based on a combination of identity. You know, the interesting thing, though, the difference between Biden and Trump is that Biden is kind of an old school politician. His mistakes are old school. His cadences are old school. The glad handing, he's a kissing baby politician. Trump isn't like that. And if you put these two guys up against each other, they may be similar in age, but in terms of temperament and energy, Donald Trump will walk all over him. And I think the Democrats know that.
Jesse, just this week in Iowa, they polled a bunch of Democrats there, and they asked, what are you looking for? Are you looking for experience and et cetera? What a lot of them said is they wanted somebody younger, somebody from the younger generation. Do you think that will emerge?
Yeah, it has to. Well, everyone's younger than Joe Biden, so I don't think it's really an issue.
Wait, not Bernie.
Maybe, that's true.
Bernie's pretty close.
That's true.
Maybe Bernie's younger.
I stand corrected. Everybody looks old. So I think the issue is he only has one card to play. He is a long-time Washington politician that has a lot of experience in Washington. He can't change that. So he has to say, I'm experienced. He has to say, I know what I'm doing. And he's going to say, I'm going to come back to Washington, restore dignity to the White House, restore order, restore normalcy, and repair all the institutions that Donald Trump has destroyed.
Wait a second. I thought you were a Trump supporter.
I'm saying that's his pitch.
I got lost there.
Right, that's his pitch. So, and what he's doing, he's saying, I'm admitting I'm a gaffe machine. But my gaffes are not gaffes, because what do they say a gaffe is in Washington when a politician tells the truth? So he's saying, I'm so honest, I make a lot of gaffes, and he's trying to own it. The problem with him, it's not all gaffes. He's got a terrible voting record. He's got terrible instincts. He's got no charisma, no base, can't raise a lot of money. That's not really his problem.
And to that point, Juan, I wanted to ask you this. So if Joe Biden says he's the most qualified, he's going to go out there, there's a big part of the party that has moved very far left. And Joe Biden would have to explain to them why he was on the other side of all of those issues for the last 30 years.
Well, the interesting thing is that Joe Biden's in the clear lead in this poll that was done, I think, Harvard-Harris. It was published in The Hill. In second place is Bernie Sanders. So I think what they're looking for is almost in the model, Dana, I think this might appeal to you, of a George H.W. Bush, someone with experience, someone who knows Washington, knows how the game is played. I, by the way, differ with my colleagues here. I think that Biden and Sanders they'd love to trade punches with
That's like
Donald
the two
Trump.
old guys from the Muppets.
Well, yeah, okay, and what is Donald Trump then? I don't know.
We're talking about energy levels.
Yeah, and then you get Mike Bloomberg and people like that. Mike Bloomberg would have trouble, Dana, on something like stop and frisk and policing. Everybody's going to have issues. But, I remember Ronald Reagan's favorite saying when he was debating against, who was he debating? Mondale? He says, I'm not going to hold my opponent's youth and inexperience against him. And so I think some of these folks that you say are older that may have great appeal.
Look, I'm not being ageist here. I do want to mention one thing, and Lisa, I'll get your comment on this, and then I know Greg wants to weigh in. Michael Avenatti, the creepy you-know-what lawyer, announcing today that he is not going to run in 2020. The Democrats probably getting a pass on that one.
Yeah, I think they're all probably saying thank God, right? But look, regarding Joe Biden, I think he would actually give President Trump a run for his money in a general election, particularly in places like Macomb County, those blue-collar areas that President Trump did so well. But the problem for Joe Biden is I don't think he can get there because Democrats are going to have a really crowded primary field just like Republicans did. And the reason why President Trump was able to make his way through that crowded primary field was because he was so vastly different than the other candidates that were in the mix. Joe Biden isn't that different than, the maybe 30-something candidates that are going to run. So I think we actually may end up seeing someone that breaks through that Democrat primary field that we're not talking about right now. That isn't even on our radar.
To watch.
Yeah, exactly.
Greg, tell me what you think about Avenatti.
The unfairness of Avenatti is that he was accused of something, and the accusation was alone enough to derail his future ambitions. It's appropriate justice given the fact that he spearheaded a movement to derail the career by weaponizing accusations untethered to evidence. So that's how the world works.
Boom.
Indeed. I'm going to give you the last word on that. All right, up next, why The Little Mermaid and the song Baby It's Cold Outside are under attack.
Get ready because the PC police are out in full force yet again. Nice. Well, first up, an academic claims some meat-based expressions could be on the chopping block because vegans find them offensive. PETA has been pushing to change certain phrases for years in his recommendations. Bring home the bacon should be bring home the bagels. And taking the bull by the horns becomes taking the flowers by the thorns. So, Dana, taking the flowers by the thorns doesn't really have the same ring to it, does it?
It sure doesn't. And I was waiting for the press release from PETA announcing mission accomplished, because apparently they have succeeded in making sure that all animals are treated ethically, because now they're going to spend their time going after language. I mean, that's a lot of progress for PETA.
Greg, why all the sensitivity? Why have we become so sensitive as a nation?
This is actually a pretty big deal. When we talk about the PC police, it's us. It's actually human beings. It's not like we used to think 1984 Orwellian cult. It was going to be the government that's out to silence us and adjust our behavior. But it's actually young people on campuses. When I was growing up and when everybody was growing up, young kids didn't care about this stuff. Their primary thing was to break rules, to take risks, to have fun. Now they are policing speech. They have become the tattlers and the hall monitors. And you can see, and what do they graduate from? They graduate to media blogs, right? They want to police language on campus. Then they go onto media blogs where they try to catch people and go, aha, because they can't get a real job. They aren't creative.
Who are you referring to?
I'm referring to every media blog where they all, because they're kind of they're not doing what they want to do, so they just have to sit there and go after people who are fulfilling their dreams.
You ever go
like
on
Jesse,
a right-wing blog? It's worse.
No, they're not about. They don't chase media. They chase people.
All right, up next, a crackdown on some classics. Take a listen to this.
Don't be scared, you got to move your head, go on and kiss the girl.
The Kiss the Girl song from its Little Mermaid performance over concerns about consent and misogyny. And a controversy has erupted over this Christmas song.
What's the sense of hurting my pride?
I really can't
Oh, baby, don't hold out, baby,
but
it's cold outside.
The Cleveland radio station under fire for pulling Baby It's Cold Outside after a listener complained that the holiday tune was inappropriate among the Me Too movement. Juan, haven't we just taken this too far? And also, with the Baby It's Cold Outside, it was cold outside. She wanted to stay to have another drink. What's wrong with that?
I don't think it was that he was seducing her, Lisa.
But
How dare he?
So I think seduction's quite intriguing, and I love this song. Greg tells me he hates it.
I hate duets.
Yeah, okay, but I love this song. But I understand that they just want to be clear that, you know, you shouldn't be tricking a woman or pulling off her hat or
Taking off her hat.
But Jesse,
that's what he did in the video.
Oh my God, God forbid.
Yeah, but doesn't that kind of take away a woman's agency? I mean, she chose to stay. I mean, are we sort of, even with the Kiss the Girl song, are we what is wrong with, you know, being courted or a guy wanting to kiss a girl or going on a date? I mean, things have
Clearly
just gone
she's not in
nuts
control.
with this.
You know what I think is sexy? Consent is sexy. I think anytime you want a woman to come stay for another drink, you have her sign a legal document. Anytime you want to move in and try to kiss her, sign a legal document.
Wait, what about
Make
the
it
selfies?
airtight.
Selfies.
That is sexy. Consent is sexy.
That sounds like it's going to be a great dating world in the future.
Well, that's how it's working now.
You're right.
That is what is happening. People are doing that, and if you don't, and also the thing is, you almost have to have somebody present, because you never know. Like if it's just you and this other person.
Alexa
is going to be the AI policeman.
No, you're gonna get sent like a text with some sort of consent form before going on dates. All right, well, and finally, a 9-year-old scores a big win by getting a Colorado town to end its ban on snowball flights. Dane Best successfully convincing his local town officials to make it legal again to throw snowballs at people after it was banned for nearly a decade, or nearly a century rather. So huge win here for freedom, right, Greg?
Yes, I am pro snowball.
Yeah, I mean, this is what the founders had in mind when they drafted the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
These are the types of, this is like a rite of passage. You have to hit someone in the face with a snowball younger than you at a certain point in your life. And,
Bullier.
And that makes that young person more resilient.
Oh,
and
my
that's
gosh.
an important rite of
That's
passage.
Dana. Dana is from a place that makes snowballs. She's the snowball champion.
Dana?
Remember, I told you that my grandfather on the ranch, he did not let us throw snowballs because he had seen, well, he said he saw somebody's eye get taken out by one once. But here's the thing. I am pro snowball if it means fewer snowflakes.
Oh,
Well, that's a good point. I mean, Juan, there's a lot of snowflakes out there, aren't there?
I think there are a lot of people who worry in terms of the culture war that we don't take care of each other, that we bully people. That, as Jesse said, throw it at a younger, weaker soul. Come on.
I meant
You know,
like a
Juan,
younger brother.
I admire Juan. Juan is just putting up a manufactured defense because he knows it's exciting.
You know what? I like snowball fights. I got no problem myself. But I think the idea that you're missing is that people worry about, bullying or a culture where men can be overly aggressive.
Okay, we should do a snowball fight, shoot on the 5. Let's style that up, producers.
Yeah, really.
Yep. Perfect. All
I'm
right.
in.
Perfect. All right. Well, one more thing is coming up next. Stay tuned.
New signs that Robert Mueller's so-called witch hunt is reportedly close to wrapping up. Yahoo News says the special counsel's legal team told President Trump's attorneys that they are, quote, tying up loose ends in the Russia investigation. This comes as new court filings due today on former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn could offer a roadmap to the Mueller findings. All right, so we're waiting this sentencing memo, Lisa. We have no idea what's going to be in it, but there's a lot of speculation. One of the things we do know is that James Comey did tell congressional investigators that he didn't think Flynn intentionally lied when the feds questioned him.
And that's been something that's been in the back of my mind this entire time regarding Flynn, because you're right. Chairman Chuck Grassley of the Judiciary Committee has said that when Comey met with congressional investigators, the FBI investigators led them to believe that they didn't think that Flynn had lied. And then Mueller takes over the special counsel investigation, and then Flynn pleads to lying. And pleads guilty to lying. So, and then also Chairman Grassley has been on DOJ and the FBI to, one, give them the 302s with the interview that they conducted with Flynn so they can see what kind of questions were asked, what Flynn said. And they've also asked for the transcript of Flynn's conversation with the former ambassador Kislyak as well. None of those things have been provided to the chairman yet. So I have a big question about that. Did Flynn actually lie? And the tactics, I think it also speaks to sort of the tactics of Mueller as well, those hard-nosed tactics.
Right. And speaking of hard-nosed tactics, Cohen, the former attorney for President Trump, is due to be sentenced next week. And Juan, it looks like he's caught up in some Trump tower that doesn't even exist in Moscow. Somehow there's a scandal there, but he's facing hard time as well.
How's that whistling past the graveyard going for you, Jesse? I
mean, you're a great whistler.
He's great. He's great. I tell you, he does it every day, Lisa. Whistling past what is obvious. By the way, before we get going, can I ask Greg a question?
Sure.
Who is scot-free? Because I see that President Trump is tweeting that Cohen should get maximum sentence and not get away, and then he puts in uppercase S and Scott.
I think that's Tariff Man's cousin.
Yeah, exactly. all I know is it's always great to see liberals criticize people over misspelling words.
It wasn't misspelled.
I think there's enough to go around.
But then he had this Twitter fury this morning.
Yes.
He went after not only Cohen, but then he said that Manafort, was it Manafort or Roger Stone, had guts.
Stone has guts.
Stone has guts because he won't testify.
Probably.
He won't turn on him. I mean, what is that obstruction of justice or what?
No, I don't think it is.
You know what's interesting? Listening to Juan and listening to other networks, it's like watching someone describe a drug trip that you're not on. They're just seeing things. It's hallucinations, impeachment, resignation, jail time. It's been a 2-year-long acid trip, and it's not the good acid. And then the media, to them, to the media, it's almost like Christmas. It's Christmas. This is their Christmas because, they don't really believe in this stuff anyway. So, but they're at the stage now where they're hanging the stockings and they're looking under the beds and the closets for all the presents. But the bottom line, they're never going to be happy unless they get this guy out because they're still suffering from being beaten and humiliated 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
thought
they
that's
could get
what
coal
you
in their stockings. You don't know what Mueller's going to say.
Yeah,
Clean coal.
Clean coal.
Clean coal.
I agree. But we don't know what he's going to say, so I'm not leaping to any conclusions here.
Oh, you would never do that, Mr.
No, but I will say, but I will say, boy, when you see the kind of fury in his tweetings this morning,
But this is old
it's like,
news.
wow, something's happening.
This
out
is
there.
old news. Every day you're surprised by his tweets. To me, it's just like checking the weather. It's like, it's 49 degrees and there's a tweet.
Also, didn't Juan just leap to a conclusion?
What's
you
the
just told that you
conclusion?
say we shouldn't leap to conclusions, but then you're reading his tweets and concluding something.
Let's
No,
come on.
I said,
Can
people
we go
don't act
to
like that without a reason. Lisa.
Let's go to someone who's never been on an acid trip. Dana Perino in Washington, D.C. Dana, close it out for us. The Mueller investigation, hopefully, winding down.
So the Yahoo reporter that did that piece saying that it was about to wrap up is Michael Isikoff. Way back when I worked at the Justice Department, he was with, I think it was either Newsweek or Time magazine. And when we were spokespeople for the Justice Department, you could almost count every Friday night at 5 o'clock, Michael Isikoff would call and say, yeah, I'm about to drop a big story on you guys on Sunday. So he's got very good sources, follow him, pay attention to it. And the other thing I would say is, if they are trying to wrap it up, everyone just put on your seatbelt. There's going to be some turbulence before this thing is landed, but the plane will safely land and everyone will be able to move on.
They'll never move on, Dana. They're never going to move on.
Well, then they can sit behind on the tarmac.
There you go.
Oh.
They can take the bus.
That tarmac. Maybe Bill will be there with Loretta. All right, President Trump ripping Democrats after caravan migrants breach the border. Hear what he's saying up next.